Hey YouTube, Girsu here, and today we are coming at you with a Salamangreat deck profile. It's been a long time coming, and honestly this is like one of my favorite Link decks because of its versatility and how you can play it, and its recursive ability allows it to stand up against many of the top tier decks, including Adamantipator's Eldritch, has a very decent matchup against Orcust, whether it be win or lose, and it absolutely destroys rogue decks. Now, let's just get started. So, Salamander Gazelle, honestly, the most iconic Salamangreat monster. It's honestly the best one. And so, this is going to be your main playmaker. It says, if a Salamangreat monster is sent to the graveyard except during its damage step in any way and except him, you can special summon him from your hand. And when he's normal or special summoned, you can send one Salamangreat card from your deck to the graveyard. So, this card sets up all of your plays, and it's also just a really good monster in of itself. So, sadly, it's at 1. I honestly wish it was at 3. I had fun playing it when it was at 3, but you just have to follow the rules. Next up, 3 Salamangreat Spinny. Now, this card can serve 2 purposes. 1, it can discard itself to target a face-up Salamangreat monster on the field and give it 500 attack. Let's say you need to run over some problematic card, like, let's say you have any Salamangreat monster on the field, and there's like a Baguska on their side. You can use this card, discard it, gain 500 attack, and run it over. And it also says that if it's in the graveyard and you control a Salamangreat monster other than him, you can special summon him, but when it leaves the field, so that adds extra synergy to the deck, and he's also good discard fodder for cards like Signet Mining. Now, we have 3 Salamangreat Foxy. So, when this card is normal summoned, you can activate the top 3 cards of your deck, and if you do, you add 1 Salamangreat card from there and put it in your hand, and the rest gets shuffled into the deck. Now, that's a really good normal summon ability. It allows you to go potentially +1 from it, so you can just search out anything. And it also has a graveyard effect, where if it's in the graveyard and there's a face-up spell or trap card on the field, you can discard a Salamangreat monster to special summon it. Then you can destroy 1 face-up spell or trap card on the field. Note, you can, so if you're the only one with a face-up field spell, you don't have to destroy anything. But if your opponent has a floodgate out, this card's a really good out to it. And it also sets up your graveyard. So let's say this card's in your graveyard and you have a Spinny in your hand, and your opponent has, I don't know, Imperial Order, so you can't Signet Mining. You just discard the Spinny, special summon this, and then you can special summon Spinny and go from there. Next, we have 1 Salamangreat Falco and 1 Salamangreat Jaguar. So, Salamangreat Falco says if he's sent to the graveyard, you can target a Salamangreat spell or trap card in your graveyard and set it to your field. Now, that effect's also good because it allows you to set your resource, allows you to get back your resources and basically make more plays if you want to. And while he's in the graveyard, if you control a Salamangreat monster, you can target the 1 Salamangreat monster you control, bounce it to the hand, and then special summon him. And you can only use 1 effect of it per turn, and only once that turn, but bouncing back a Gazelle and then using Falco as material, and then summoning the Gazelle, and then sending a Salad from the deck to the graveyard, it's just nuts. And we have Salamangreat Jaguar. So, if he has a piercing damage effect, which basically is irrelevant, but while he's in your graveyard, you can target a Salamangreat monster in your graveyard except him, shuffle it back into the deck, and then special summon him to a zone a Salamangreat Link monster points to. So, you're going to want to use this to shuffle your Link monsters back into your extra deck, although there are some occasions when you're going to have to shuffle your main deck monsters back in, but given how much this deck can actually search out, your main deck, that really isn't that much of an issue, although it doesn't honestly help you go further, but these 2 cards are essential to having Salamangreat's recursive ability be in full effect. Now, with the starter plays, 3 Lady Debug. It's kind of obvious why this card is like really good in this deck. On normal or special summon, you can add a level 3 or lower Cyber monster from your deck to your hand. Coincidentally, Foxy, Spinny, and Gazelle are all level 3, so this card can just search them out on normal or special summon, and it's also 1700 attack, so it's not actually that bad. Sadly, it is a light monster, so you can't really use it as material to go into one of your bigger Link monsters, but it's really good at going into your starter Link monster, Salamangreat Balinks. Now we have 3 Flame Buffalo. If this face-up card leaves the field, you can discard a Cyberse monster, and if you do, draw 2 cards. Hard ones per turn. That's just self-explanatory why this card's good. It's also a fire monster, which is really good. We'll get into that more on later, but this card is just absolutely fantastic as a starter, and it sets up your plays a lot easier than a majority of the normal summons in this deck can. Now, 3 Parallel Exceed. So, if this card is spell summoned by the effect of Parallel Exceed, its level becomes 4 and its original attack and defense are halved, and you can only use each effect once per turn. If you Link Summon, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if this card is normal or special summon, you can special summon a Parallel Exceed from your deck. Now, this card serves an incredible purpose in Salamangreat, as it allows them to go into rank 4 Exceeds really easily, but it also just becomes a level 4 Cyberse monster, which is actually really essential if you want to summon 2 Balinks using these things. But I find it's a lot better to go into rank 4s a majority of the time, because the rank 4s that Salas can play are really, really good, and this card helps them play them a lot easier than just playing regular Salads. Now, 3 Ash Blossom. It's self-explanatory. When your opponent activates a card effect that would add a card from the deck to the hand, special summon a monster from the deck, or send a card from the deck to the graveyard, you can discard this card and negate that effect. It's a staple card, and it serves... It's really good in Salamangreats because of a card we'll get into later, which can make you recycle this over and over again. Now, 3 Nibiru. Reason why is because Salads likes going first sometimes, but a majority of the time it would like to go second, so it can establish a board more often, as when it goes first, you're subject to getting hit by Nibiru because of all the summoning you're going to do, and playing 3 Nibiru in Salamangreats is actually really nice, because although Salads is a good deck, its attack values aren't that high, and its removal is mainly based in traps, so having Nibiru in your opening hand and being able to out your opponent's board is really essential in the current meta, especially against decks like Adamancipator, and it's a really nice card, so when you open it, you should feel good about it. Now, onto the spells and traps. 1 Salamangreat Sanctuary. If you would Link Summon a Salamangreat monster, you can use 1 Salamangreat monster you control with the same name as the entire material. That is the only effect that will ever come up ever in a game. The reason why this is essential is because Salamangreat Link monsters, 2 of them, gain their effects based on having been Link summoned using a monster with the same name. We'll get more into that later, but this card is essential, and you can search it off your Link 1, which is really nice. Now, 2 Will of Salamangreat. Reason why I don't like playing 3 is because it can honestly clog up your hand, and you would rather have another extender like Lady Debug or Flame Buffalo, but this card says during your main phase you can special summon a Salamangreat monster from your hand or graveyard. It doesn't target, so your opponent doesn't really get a choice. They have to just respond to the effect. They can't respond to the special summon, so that's really nice. And you can send this face-up card from your field to the graveyard, then target 1 Salamangreat Link monster you control that was Link summoned using a monster with the same name, and then you get to special summon Salamangreat monsters from your hand and or graveyard in defense position up to the number of that monster's Link rating. You can only use 1 effect of it per turn, and only once that turn, but as an archetypal monster reborn that you can recycle every single turn if you really need to, it serves such a nice purpose in the deck, and special summoning from the graveyard, say you have a Gazelle in there that you need to get out immediately, then yeah, it's just such a nice card for the deck. And we have 1 Salamangreat Circle. Playing this card at 3, it's really, really good. You get to choose one of these effects. Add 1 Salamangreat monster from your deck to your hand, or target a Salamangreat Link monster that you control that was Link summoned using a monster with its name as material, and it becomes unaffected by other monster effects except its own. That second effect is kind of a niche use. You'd rather go for the first effect as just like a quick play searcher, so you can get around some of your opponent's cards and you can chain stuff. And it's really nice when you can recycle it. Now we have 3 Signet Minings. Now, this card serves 2 purposes in Salamangreat. One, it's a searcher for their entire deck, and 2, it's set up in their graveyard. Because you could send a card from your hand to the graveyard, add a level 4 or lower Cyberse monster from your deck to your hand. It's a hard once per turn, that kind of obvious, is generic, but serving 2 purposes in 1 spell card for your deck is really, really good, and that's what Signet Mining accomplishes for Salamangreats, and that's why you have to play it at 3. Now, 3, Call by the Grave. This card is just like, it's a staple card. You're going to have to play it because the graveyard central, it's not really that the decks are graveyard centralized, it's just hand traps are so common in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! That basically you need to have it out for them. So if you run into an Ash Blossom when you use Salamander Gazelle's effect, you should probably have a Call by the Grave ready, and this is why you should play it at 3, as it can stop the effect and banish it. Although, if you do one on your opponent's Ash Blossom and you have one in your hand, sadly during your opponent's next turn, you can't use Ash Blossom, but sometimes it's an inconvenience, but other times it's really not. This card is just amazing, and it will get you so much further than you would regularly go if you didn't have one. And for the final spell is 1 Foolish Burial. Send a monster from your deck to the graveyard. Self-explanatory. All the most of the Salamangreat monsters have good graveyard effects, and you're not even going. You're basically going +1 with this card in a majority of situations, and it's Foolish Burial. Now, with the 2 Salamangreat trap cards, Salamangreat Rage and Salamangreat Roar. Salamangreat Rage says activate one of these effects. Send 1 Salamangreat monster from your hand or face up on the field of the graveyard, then target 1 card on the field, destroy it. Or, the second effect is target 1 Salamangreat Link monster you control that was Link summoned using a monster with the same name as his material. Destroy cards your opponent controls up to that monster's Link rating. Now, this card is one of the cornerstones of why Salamangreat is such a good control deck, is because they can deal with multiple cards with 1 card, and they can recycle it back like every single turn. So if your opponent doesn't have really good protection or a really good out to this card, eventually you're just going to grind your opponent out of resources and just win for them not having any cards. Now their other card is Salamangreat Roar, which is an Infinity Barrier for their archetype, but you have to control Salamangreat Link monster, which is quite literally the easiest thing in the world to do. But it has a second effect where, while this card's in the graveyard, if a Salamangreat Link monster is Link summoned to your field using a monster with the same name as material, you can set this card from your graveyard but banish it when it leaves the field. And you can only use 1 effect of it per turn, and only once that turn. So you can't negate and then set it with its second effect, but so what? It's an Infinity Barrier for your deck, and it also has a graveyard effect to set itself back, so that's also really good, and it honestly just helps the deck out so much more than it needed to. Now we have 1 of Solemn Judgment, classic counter trap. This card is just so old, but it's so much more relevant now than it was like back in the day, because like stopping your opponent from doing a lot of actions is kind of how this game is played now. And this card says pay half your life points to stop an opponent's summon or spell or trap card activation, but like that's just paying half your life points isn't even a cost anymore. So like it doesn't matter as long as your opponent's not doing anything. And then, finally, for the main deck, you have 3 Infinite Impermanents. So, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, negate its effects until the end of this turn. Then, if this card was set before it was activated and was on the field at resolution, for the rest of the turn, all other spell and trap cards in this column are negated. And if you control no cards, you can activate it from your hand. So, this card is the literal definition of a hand trap, along with cards like Evenly Matched and Red Reboot, but this card is just, it's so nice because going second, it allows you to interact with your opponent more by activating from your hand and stopping their monster effects from going off. And basically, in a control deck like Salamangreat, you need to stop your opponent from obtaining as much card advantage as possible so you can out-resource them a majority of the time. Infinite Impermanence helps you out a lot. This card is amazing, and I would suggest that most decks should play it at 3. if they can't fit it, whatever, that's fine. It's your deck decision, but I would just suggest this card at 3 at all times. It's really good against a majority of matchups, and especially in Salamangreats, it's one of those cards that you honestly don't want to go without. It's just so useful in Salamangreats. Now, moving on to the extra deck, going to be a little obvious. 3 Salamangreat Bailings. This card is actually insane. It's a link 1 with an arrow that points down. That's automatically good. Its material is 1 level 4 lower Cyberse monster. Somewhat generic. And if this card is link summoned, you can add 1 Salamangreat Sanctuary from your deck to your hand. That's your field spell. That's why this card is... It's not the only reason why this card is good, but without Bailing, Salamangreat has a very struggling matchup against the majority of decks, because if a Salamangreat card or the cards you control be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. And you can only use each effect once per turn. That line about the graveyard, that's not an effect, that's a replacement. So if you have multiple Bailingses, you can use them all in one turn. Say your opponent destroys, or at least attempts to destroy, multiple cards in one turn. You can use Bailing's graveyard effect multiple times. This card is basically one of your playmakers from the extra deck that really gets the ball rolling, but this card serves so many things. It just does so much for the deck, and it honestly helps it compete in this new meta, because without that destruction protection, Salamangreats can fall apart quite easily, although its resiliency really helps in ensuring that even without Salamangreat Bailings all the time in your graveyard, you can still play the game. It's just having this as an out to destruction is really, really good, and makes this deck so much more potent and so much more resilient to basically just not having a losing matchup all the time. It's also extremely free. It's a link 1, so you don't have to waste that many resources making you waste 1 monster making it, and it has an extremely beneficial effect, and it honestly helps Sal is just go ahead and be the deck that it is. But by saying be the deck that it is, I don't believe there's one more Salad monster that's more iconic than Sunlight Wolf. This card is just nuts. So, it's a link 2 with 1800 attack, and its arrows point up and down, and it takes 2 fire effect monsters. A majority of your deck is going to be fire effect monsters. And it says, if a monster or monsters is normal or special summoned to one of the zones that he points to, or both, if your opponent summons 2 of them, except during the damage step, you can add 1 fire monster from your graveyard to your hand, but for the rest of the turn, you cannot normal summon, set, or special summon monsters with the added name. So, this card is really good because if you're going second and you already have an Ash Blossom in your graveyard because you used it on your opponent, what you can do is you can summon a monster to the zone that Sunlight Wolf points to, and then bring back your Ash Blossom for next turn. And that is just Ash Blossom every single turn from you just playing the game is insane. And it has a second effect where if you control this card that was link summoned using Salamangreat Sunlight Wolf as material, you can add 1 Salamangreat spell or trap card from your graveyard to your hand, and you can only use each effect of it once per turn. Now, adding a Salamangreat spell or trap card from your graveyard to your hand is really good, especially with cards like Roar and Rage, where you can just have multiple pops or negates every single turn from this card alone, and even if your opponent summons to the zone that he points to, if he's in the extra monster zone, you just get the value back by bringing back anything, because it says zones. So, if your opponent's not careful, they could accidentally give you an Ash Blossom back, or a Salamander Gazelle, or a Foxy, or a Flame Buffalo. It's just, your opponent has to play around this card, and it's a link 2. That's what makes it so good, because it's free, and shuffling this thing back with Jack Jaguar is really, really nice, because you need to ensure that your Sunlight Wolf basically is live every single turn, and it's just, this card is the boss monster of the deck, so you're going to want to keep this card on the field at all times as much as possible, and as it provides so much advantage that the deck couldn't have without it, and you're not playing Salads if you don't have 3 of this card in your extra deck. Now to their second boss monster, I guess. It's not really a boss monster per se, more of a beat stick, I guess. It's Salamander Heatley. It's a link 3, and its arrows are like decode talkers, and it takes 2+ fire effect monsters. So if you use Salamander Sunlight Wolf in one of your fire effect monsters, you can make this card. It says if this card is link summoned, you can target one card in your opponent's spell and trap card zone and shuffle it back into the deck. And then it says, once per turn during your main phase, if this card was link summoned using a Salamander Heatley's material, you can target one face-up monster on the field and one monster in your graveyard. The attack of the first target becomes equal to the other targets until the end of the turn. Note, neither of these effects are once per turn, so making a Heatley and then reincarnating it with Salamander Sanctuary is really good because you get to basically put 2 cards back into the deck. So if your opponent has basically like a bunch of battle traps or something, you can spin them back into the deck. And having 2300 attack is really good. And that second effect, if you have an Ash Blossom in your graveyard, you can basically run over any monster. And this card is that's like the one purpose that this card serves, is getting problem monsters out of the way. Because if your opponent has a monster that can't be destroyed by card effects, obviously your Salamangreat traps aren't going to be able to deal with it, but Heatley can. And it's also a link 3. It puts Sunlight Wolf into the graveyard for Jaguar, and its arrows are good, not amazing, but like, what do you expect? It's an all-around good card, and you don't have to play 3, but you should at least be playing 2. I just choose to play 3 because I really do like the card. Now, onto the extender, Splash Mage. It's a water monster. Yes, it breaks the theme, but this card is really good. Its arrows are surprisingly decent at best, and it takes 2 Cyberse monsters. Your entire deck is Cyberse monsters, essentially. And it says you can target 1 Cyberse monster in your graveyard, special summon it in defense position, but negate its effects. Also, you can't special summon for the rest of the turn except Cyberse monsters. And you can only use this effective Splash Mage once per turn. So, this card reviving one of your Cyberse monsters allows you to go into more link plays, and it's also just really, really nice. Sadly, it's a water monster. I wish it was a fire monster, but we really can't have all the things that we wish for. But this card is still really nice, and it's also a really good extender because, you know, Monster Reborn from the extra deck is really nice, and it's actually really easy to make. Like, this card just, it's so nice in Salamangreats, and that's where its home is. Now, onto the generic link monsters. We're going to have Nightmare Phoenix and Nightmare Unicorn. So, Nightmare Phoenix takes 2 monsters with different names, and if it's link summoned, you can discard a card, then target a spell or trap card your opponent controls, destroy it. Then if this card was co-linked, when the effect is activated, you can draw a card, and your co-linked monsters can't be destroyed by battle. This card having an up arrow is really nice because if you summon it underneath Sunlight Wolf, it gives Sunlight Wolf an extra layer of protection that they'd have to get over by getting rid of Nightmare Phoenix first, which puts this card, it puts a target on Nightmare Phoenix, which is good because it's not on Sunlight Wolf. And it also has 1900 attack, and its arrows are relatively forgiving. And being able to pop spell and traps and discarding a card, it's not a cost in Salamangreats. And you do get to draw a card if it's summoned underneath Sunlight Wolf. So this card, it's also a fire monster. Nightmare Phoenix is really good in this deck. And Nightmare Unicorn is the monster you're going to want to make off Splash Mage, because it takes 2 monsters with different names, and its arrows are actually really good, 2200 attack. And it says if it's link summoned, you can discard 1 card, then target 1 card in the field, spin it back into the deck. And then if it was co-linked when the effect is activated, you could just draw a card. And its second effect, you can only use that effect once per turn, but its second effect is, while any co-linked Nightmare monsters are on the field, and you just draw a card for each co-linked monster, each monster co-linked with a Nightmare monster with a different name. That effect won't come up in Salamangreats, although some decks can get that, but mainly you're going to want to use it off Splash Mage, bring back any of your Salamangreats, then make Unicorn and spin a card back into the deck. Just added versatility and added removal is really nice. Now, Borel Sword Dragon, this card is just, this card is the cream of the crop. This is one of your OTK machines, along with Access Code Talker. This card and Access Code Talker are like game ender cards in themselves. It takes 3+ effect monsters. It can't be destroyed by battle, and then once per turn is a quick effect. You can target one attack position monster on the field, change it into defense position, then this card can make a second attack. With 3,000 attack, that's really good, as you can just get in for 6,000, but if this card attacks a monster, it gains attack equal to half of that monster's attack, and then that monster it attacked loses that much. So this card's always going to attack for 3,000 every time that it hits a monster. So if your opponent has no way to out this card, it will just like end the game, and it's really, really good at doing so. Now for the last two cards in the extra deck, the two cards you're going to make off Parallel Exceed, Dugares or Abyss Dweller. Depending on which turn it is, you're going to make either one or the other. If it's your first turn and your opponent hasn't gone yet, you're going to make Abyss Dweller. It takes 2 level 4s, and while this card has these materials that were originally water that were attached to it, your water monsters gain 500 attack. That effect's not relevant in Salamangreats because they're all fire monsters, and you don't actually have any waters in your main deck. But you make this card off Parallel Exceed because it's just a free rank 4, and it says once per turn during either player's turn, you can detach 1 Exceed material from this card, and effects that activate in your opponent's graveyard can't be activated this turn. This card is really good against basically every deck because it shuts down Jet Synchron, shuts down Orcus, shuts down Eldritch graveyard effects, shuts down Salamangreats. It's just all around good card, and your opponent will have a tough time getting around the disabling effect because it really just puts a hole in a majority of the meta decks, and it honestly is just one of the best rank 4s. Honestly the best rank 4 right now to play in your extra deck, and it's a floodgate that lasts for an entire turn that your opponent might not be able to respond to, because if they try and infinite impermanence this during their standby phase, if they control no cards, you can just respond by activating this effect, and your opponent doesn't really have a chance to get around it. And it's just one of those necessary rank 4s that you're going to have if you're playing Parallel Exceed. And the other one is number 60, Dugares the Timeless. It takes 2 level 4s, and you can detach 2 materials to activate one of the following effects. First effect, skip your next draw phase, also draw 2 and then discard 1. Skip your next main phase 1, then special summon 1 monster from your graveyard in defense position. Or skip your next battle phase, also double the attack of 1 monster you control until the end of this turn. And you can only use this effect of number 60 Dugares the Timeless once per turn. Okay, so with this card, you're most likely going to want to either do the draw 2, then discard 1, or special summon from the graveyard. Doubling the attack is sometimes necessary, only at times where you feel like you can OTK. Well, if you can just win by dealing battle damage. And Dugares is also a fire monster, which helps in making Sunlight Wolf. And drawing 2 and discarding 1 is obviously going to be the best one for Salamangreats. And it's just making these 2 off Parallel Exceed after you link summon Balinks is really, really nice. And these 2 monsters will help you go a long way when playing Salamangreats. And that'll be all for the deck. I hope you guys liked it. If you like content like this, hit subscribe, hit the like button. Thanks for watching. Girsu out.